Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guests are the co-writers of Exploit, a new miniseries over at Mad Cave, and a pair of comics journalism legends. That's right, legends. It's Laura Hudson and Tim Leong. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Was Legends too much?
No, I loved it, but I mean, Tim, you can see Tim and I's. I feel like you could do a psychoanalysis of Tim and I by just looking at our reactions right now.
Yeah, you can see me kind of, if you're watching, slowly die inside.
Yeah, where I'm like, how do you respond to praise? And I'm like, amazing. And Tim's like,
I do want to say when Heidi McDonald wrote about Exploit's announcement for The Beat, she did describe you two as the team that changed comics journalism forever. So I feel like I can go with Legends. Legends kind of works there. Sorry, Tim, I'm making you increasingly uncomfortable.
That came into Heidi really paid off.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. But
no, I appreciate that from Heidi, but I also appreciate it because I'm pretty sure she wouldn't blow smoke up our asses.
That's true.
Heidi's the best. Heidi's the best.
Heidi's
and she's definitely the person we looked up to when we first started doing comics journalism.
I mean, she gave me my start.
Talk about a legend. Heidi's a legend.
She's also very honest, which is sometimes good and sometimes bad. Sometimes it makes me sad, but I'm like, but good sad, because I learned from the sad. Thanks, Heidi. You're the best.
She's the best.
I think you need people that you can rely upon to do that. I think that that's part of journalism. You know, one of the things I think about this, where in terms of writers and editors and that sort of thing, where, you know how like in college, people were like, follow the professor, you know, like within your field, like follow the person who teaches really well and not just the class. And I've always felt that way about writers too, and sometimes editors, where it'd be like, one thing I used to love was when I was like deep in the game and something would come out and people would want to know what I thought about it specifically. And it would be because they knew what my taste was. I'd made it very clear, right? And I felt like I'd been honest about who I am, what my taste is, what I like. So they knew that when a comic hit me, they could tell whether or not they were going to like it based on how I liked it. And that was because I was honest. If I'd been, nice to everyone and everything, there would have been no meaning to my opinion. And I do like that. Like when we were with Heidi, it's like, yeah, I know she's not going to blow smoke up my ass. I know she's going to tell the truth. And I think there's a lot of value to that. I think when we talk about journalism eroding in a lot of places, and it's just like, one of my least favorite things, I said this on another podcast, but I'm going to say it again. And see, you're going to be mad that you said it was okay for us to go on tangents. But it's like every YouTube video where they're like, this thing happened and another thing happened. What do you think? Like and subscribe. And I'm like, that was nothing. At least have a fake opinion. But, they're too afraid to, having an opinion means excluding people. And that potentially. And that means that maybe you're going to get fewer likes. And so I do think that there's a way in which this sycophantic drive for every click possible really erodes the integrity of the writer, the editor, the venue. Anyway, I don't think you asked for any of this, but there you are.
I mean, you're preaching to the choir. I am the person who, Tim can attest to this. I asked for no clicks. It's probably bad for business, but at the same time, also bad for your podcast. Apologies in advance. But I do want to talk about something very specific that is not journalistic. You are, as we'll get into, you have background in comics journalism, as we were just talking about. You've done a lot of other things in your career, but you're doing something new. We were recording this the day before your first comic book comes out. How are you feeling right now? Like, does publishing a comic feel any different to you than other things you've done in your career?
I think it feels totally different. I mean, I've published a couple books. That was like its own experience. And, I've worked on, probably 1,000 magazine issues that have come out over my career. But this is the first piece of fiction, like published fiction. And so that just feels different. And maybe it shouldn't, but it does. And it's also different because it's such a collaborative effort, not only the writing, but like the drawing, the packaging, the coloring, the inking, the lettering, every aspect of it. It's just such a team effort. And so that feels a little bit different as well. But yeah, I'm not nervous. How about that?
I mean, I'm definitely in a huge state of dissociation, which I'm a pro at, so you'd expect, but like extra. You were like, how does it feel? You got your comic coming out tomorrow. And my brain was like, that information is true. And the funny thing about this is I mean, this was a collaborative book that took a long time. You know, Tim was talking about it. When I was a journalist, I would publish pieces every day. Even longer form pieces, you know, like maybe it takes a month max, but I would every day publish. I was sharing my thoughts with the world at a prodigious rate. And when I stepped back from journalism, I've worked on TV shows and some game. One of the games I worked on during the pandemic is still not out. This comic we started writing in 2019.
Wow.
And yes, so many things happened. If you imagine the time that transpired, particularly for a comic with some political over and undertones. So, because we just kept having to change it, you know, like it no longer felt like it was in alignment with the world in any way. So like the version control on this, we must have written 10 versions. I wrote versions I didn't even show you. There was one version where the whole last issue was a flashback. I never showed it to you because it didn't work. But we wrote so many versions of this over time. And like, I don't remember which ideas were mine a lot of the time. I do know that when we were talking about Kirby, there was a point when we aged her up. And I remember for me, that was when a lot of things clicked emotionally. Because for me, the emotional core of Kirby was like, she feels like she has showed up too late to the party.
Can I make a quick note, just really quick?
Yes.
This is Kirby Quo, the lead of Exploit, the new book that they have, or that Laura and Tim have coming out. Just want to note that for listeners.
Oh, yeah. Well, for a second, I was like, did I say the wrong name?
No.
No. But for me, when I'm stepping back from journalism, like kind of like in my mid-30s, I was like, I'd always wanted to do creative work. And there, you know, and then I was fairly prominent in comics journalism. I saw other people around me like making the comics, and it just, the circumstances where it would have felt right or it would have come together, it just never happened. And so then as time went on, I was like, this isn't going to happen. This thing that you wanted since you were a kid is just not going to happen. Then Tim and I started doing this, and then like, you know, we were at one publisher, we ended up changing publishers. I was like, this is never going to happen. And that's so much of the subtext for Kirby too, is that she wants to be a journalist, and she ends up getting to New York finally. And it's 10 years later than she expected. She's an intern in her mid-30s at this tech magazine, which some people would consider humiliating, but for her, like, it's still the dream. But there's that feeling of urgency beneath it all. Like, you're too late. Like, you showed up too late for the life that you wanted, and now you're running and you're not going to make it. And that's one of the driving forces for Kirby. And like, there is some part of that felt that way about creative work for me. So like when you're starting to being like, your comic's coming out tomorrow, and I'm like, I don't think I'm even like processing it. You know, I'm going to do one more tangent, and it's going to be a good one. Josie and the Pussycats was a movie. And at one point, all the girls became great friends. And this movie was panned. And at one point, one of them gave an interview, and they were like, I don't care whether or not this was a good movie. They were like, this could have been the worst movie of all time. The friendships that I made on this movie, what this has meant to my life, like I could truly give a shit. And I'm not saying that we made Josie and the Pussycats. I truly feel like we made like a very decent comic. But that sentiment, that approach of like, I know what we did, and I know how we did it, and I know what we made. And like no one but me and Tim will ever know the like, you know, the 20 layer cake that this is and how everything came together. But like, I'm proud of it. And I know what it is. And I have no idea how people are going to react. Truly none. I said this to someone else. You could tell me that this was like one of the best comics of the year or like one of the worst comics ever written. And I'd be like, you might be right. I have no distance from this. I have no ability to perceive it. And like, as someone who's been a critic, that's sort of terrifying. I need to be in a place where I'm just like, I know what I did. And people are going to respond however they're going to respond to it. They always did when I was in journalism, so why would it change now?
I'm going to introduce the book just because I think we're just going to kind of go everywhere on this.
See why I let Tim go first now?
There we go. We're talking about Exploit, which is your new series at Mad Cave that you're co-writing with art by Emiliana Pena, colorist Rebecca Good, and letterer Frank Zvetkovic. I have apologies, Frank, if I mispronounced that. That it has a first issue that is out now. Here's the solicit. Don't bury the lead, bury your enemies. Kirby Quo might be late to her true purpose in life, but no one would call the 30-something journalism intern out of time. When she uncovers a shocking secret about tech billionaire Cole Saxon, Kirby does what she always wanted to do and publishes it. But the violence and vengeance that follows is like nothing she could have anticipated, pitting Kirby, her agoraphobic roommate, and the writing staff of the defunct magazine Riot to bring justice to a world where the rich get what they want without consequence. Exploit is a timely, biting satire of the state of the American tech oligarchy with a pop-punk edge. I read the first issue, and it's great, so that's my reaction. I will say I was naturally biased to it. I immediately sent Tim a screenshot that had a reference to hackers in it, so I was all the way in.
That one I can say definitively. That one was Tim.
I figured it was, given that he was very excited about the fact that I recognized that Dade was in there. But anyways, I want to bring everything together. So for listeners that don't know, Tim and Laura did Comic Foundry, which was a actual physical comics magazine from 2007 to 2008. Laura was the editor-in-chief of Comics Alliance, a beloved comic book website that people still lament the loss of to this day. From 2009 to 2012 was when you were there, I believe.
I wish it were still here. I wish something like it were still here, very much.
I hear it all the time, to be honest. But there is a cliche idea that comics journalists always want to make comics. But this is you two doing that, even if you took your sweet time in getting there. Did you always want to make comics? Like, is Exploit I'm not saying that, like, you started a path and with Comic Foundry that led you here or something like that. But was that something you always wanted for yourselves as you were doing varying things in comics?
I did.
That wasn't the goal.
Right.
For me, that was never the goal. I always thought it'd be really, I think in the back of my head, I always thought I'd like to make comics, but I just was not there, I don't think creatively or even just like brain space wise. That didn't even enter the realm of possibility until maybe 5 years ago. I think, just through work and working in magazines, it was like all or nothing, and there just really wasn't that much extra brain space. That last job at Entertainment Weekly was just all consuming all the time. And so, I was working crazy hours, and it was also just really creatively satisfying. And so I didn't feel like I didn't feel like it really had like a big drive to do something outside of that work, because that work was everything for me at the time. And so I didn't even really think about that. But then after EW, it was kind of just like, I don't know, man. Like I feel like we talked about this a little bit, but like when I left Entertainment Weekly, when your job is everything and then you don't do that job anymore, you're kind of just like, wait a minute, what, who am I, almost like, right? As an identity, like when you put your identity into your work and then you don't do that work anymore, it's like a really abrupt shift. And I think it can really mess with your mind. And for me, it took a while to kind of separate your professional life and like your kind of creative life. And those two things can overlap, and they did for my entire career up in that point. And it was great, and it served me really well, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I think that took me a little bit to kind of figure out and kind of separate and have kind of those two different aspects of my life. And once I kind of did that, then I was kind of open to my receptors are open for trying to figure out what that even mean to possibly make a comic.
I identify primarily, like I was writing my own little books at 5 years old, my own little comics, stapling them together from Post-its. It's always been my primary way of interacting with the world. And I think journalism was a natural way to sort of harness that. And it's interesting you were talking about the creative fulfillment, Tim, because like I've always found writing to be creatively fulfilling. But this is more of a business, like as an industry, a critique that goes across industries, which is that when you're really good at a job, people tend to make you a manager. And being a manager is a completely different set of skills. And what happens when you become a manager is you end up doing less of the thing that you were doing originally, whatever it was. I don't care if you were crunching numbers or hitting golf balls or whatever. When you step into a managerial role, you're not doing the thing anymore. You're managing people who are doing the thing. And I love editing, and I think I'm pretty good at it. But I found that, like Tim, if I have two modes with my job. If I like my job, it is the only thing that I am. If I don't like my job, I will clock out as quickly as I can and go start doing things that I like and that matter to me. And yeah, I mean, there is always a secret fantasy, like someone will just want me to write X-Men. I still want to write X-Men. If someone wanted me, I have my own little theories about who I think I should write X-Men with. But it was always something I thought should happen. I just didn't know how I got from wherever I was to that. And like, also, Tim was talking about not feeling like he had the bandwidth. And it's also like you need to have ideas. And I do think that having ideas requires a certain amount of space, like especially when you're someone who's wired in like every waking moment, like I was, where it's like, where is the part where your brain starts making original ideas that aren't just reactions to things that you've seen? And that only happens with space. So like you need to make that space. And I know that that's hard as someone who was trained and required to just like be constantly fixed to the internet and like extraordinarily reactive. Was that good for my brain? No. And it's like I can feel those instincts in me all the time and I fight them to like be a normal person. But yeah, and I've been kind of limited in how I engage with social media around this, but there's a part of me that's like, do I want to like unleash the fucking Kraken? Because if I get back into social media, that's a whole door. I won't do it a little bit, guys. I'll do it a lot. And so I don't know. I have mixed feelings about this. None of this answers your question, but it's like around your question.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. IDW has an incredible March coming for readers, and it all starts with 2 big debuts. Up first is Phil Hester and Ryan Kelly's A Quiet Place, Storm Warning #1. The world ended in silence, but in Pearl, Iowa, they think they're safe. They're wrong. Set in the terrifying world of the hit films, this has tension you can feel building panel by panel. Then it's Hannah Rose May and Kelsey Ramsey's The Exorcism at Buckingham Palace #1. First it was America, now it's England. The royal family is missing, Parliament is panicking, and a Playboy heir may be the next in line to the throne if his demons don't take him first. Finally, on March 17th is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Saturday Morning Adventures on the go half-shell shenanigans, which gives readers over 300 pages of totally radical turtle chaos in a compact digest-sized edition. It's pure 90s cartoon energy you can throw in your bag and take anywhere. Hit your local comic shop and get in on it. And now, back to the show. Well, I mean, I think it answers the question because it's like you want to make comics, but you both to a real degree are very all or nothing with the things that you're doing. And so if you're have projects that are taking all of you, whether that's writing or editing or running a magazine or doing whatever, that doesn't leave a lot of space for you to find those ideas you need to make a comic. And like, even if there's 2 of you, which is, I think, a beneficial thing, you have a buddy on this journey of making comics, it's still all or nothing. And you just got to find that space. Listening to you 2 talk about this, it doesn't surprise me it took since 2019 to make it happen because you needed to find the right version of this story for the right time at the right place with the right partners. And sometimes that takes time.
It sure did, David. But it's like, the version that we would have, if this had been like ultra fast tracked somehow, if like 2019 we came out and there were massive financial forces that were like, this must be made, and it had come out then, I don't think it would have been as good of a book. I don't. I think that we've lived with these characters for a lot. Oh, and like, I think there is something to this almost like many worlds theory of like, walking down a lot of paths, because there would be things that would happen or in the world, or we just realized that the tone of the book, the world that we were making, kind of no longer matched the real world, and this is not the real world. This is a different world, you'll know, because the people are different and the places are different and things are different. We didn't want to make like, this is 100% our world except for one character is different. We wanted a little more room to like play with things without having people be like, no, that's not accurate, that's not right, we're telling a story. But I think we walked down so many of those paths by creating different versions. Like, what if Kirby had done this? What if Lennox had done this? What if actually they'd gone here and this hadn't worked? And I think that, doing the choose your own adventure of that gave us a lot more depth. Because even if we don't go down those paths, we've already thought through them. Where I'm like, I know what Lennox does if X, Y, and Z happens. And I feel like that helps build that character in your mind.
Yeah. I feel like this is, we've worked on a lot of different things, but this one was so different because I've never co-written anything before. And that experience, I think, with Laura was just so unique. And mostly because we were able to just keep playing. Like, well, what if this happened? What if this happened? And I remember in the process, early on, we'd have like I think we'd chat on the phone like once a week, and we'd chat for like an hour and just like talk about the story. And at the end, I'd be like, this is great. This sounds like, I love this story. This sounds great. Like, I don't know how this could get any better. And then the next week we get on the phone and kind of just talk about a different tangent. And I was like, whoa, this sounds great. This sounds even better than before. I don't know how we could top that. And then the next week, get on the phone and it's just like, whoa. And like every time you just start adding all these different layers to it and all these different like pathways you can go down. And just the journey of that was just really creatively satisfying. It took, I mean, to be clear, it takes a lot longer to do that, but it was very satisfying creatively.
Yeah, I also feel like the way that my mind works, like I'll have a lot of thoughts and like 10% of them are going to be fucking crazy. And Tim has experienced this on several occasions where like we'll be in a corner and I'll just start throwing shit out. And like again, 10% of the time it'll be absolutely fucking nuts. But then like there'll be other things that'll be a wide range from crazy to less crazy. And like you have to understand, for me in my mind, I'm just shooting tennis balls out of a machine. And it's really helpful to have Tim there to just be like, no, we're letting that ball go by. Because if it's just me shooting balls into space, that's the end of that story. You know, when I'm alone and writing, sometimes I end up at those points where I'm like, good, 10 ideas. They're all crazy. Nothing means anything. So having Tim there to like kind of run interference on me, I find very, very helpful. And also just like, I don't have to have every idea. You know, when I'm alone by myself coming up with my own creative projects, I have to have every idea. And there have been times in the past when I've been like, I want my own project. I want to make every idea. I want to choose the specific shade of blue. And that's good for me. And like, I have found other ways to do that. But I think that for like this kind of scale of story, I do work a lot better. I work well in a writing room. I work well with a co-writer just because like my brain is real complex and interesting and it does a lot of stuff. But I feel like the world gets richer when I am not the only voice in the room. If Tim and I do projects later, like you'll see and I'm sure people who have seen us write other things will see that like our voices are distinct. But what you're going to get here, like it is a blend of the two. Like this is not what this would look like if one of us had made this in any way. So,
and I think a lot of that also comes from us coming from journalism, right? So like if we were to publish a story, an issue, like every piece of copy goes through 3 or 4 rounds of editing with different people. Every layout goes through multiple rounds of edit, like many approval stages. You know, it's like that's how we grew up. That's what we're used to, is just like having those many layers. And I think being able to have that freedom to have and security to kind of bounce things back and forth between us and kind of do a lot of self-editing before we get it on the page has been great.
I'm sorry that this is my takeaway from your very thoughtful statements about your process and everything. But Laura, you talking about the tennis balls made me think that your process is effectively a 2-person episode of American Gladiators where you're shooting balls at him and he's dodging.
Yeah, I'm Nitro.
Yes. With Tim's name, I feel like you'd be like Laser or something like that. Maybe something a little bit fancier than that. But I did want to ask about the Comic Foundry background. The fact that, for those that don't know, Tim and Laura did a magazine called Comic Foundry between 2007 and 2008 that looked at the wider world of comics, had a real personality. I tried to find my Brian Lee O'Malley issue, the final issue, I believe, that Tim gave me at before San Diego Comic-Con 2024. And Comic Foundry tried to bridge the reader gap between Wizard Magazine and the Comics Journal. I don't know if he came up with that line or if that was just something that everyone agreed on saying every single time, but it was a good line.
I think it was tactical. I don't know about that exact language, but that was definitely...
It showed up a lot. But I am curious as to how a collaboration like that, and I'm sure you've done things since then together, but like how does having a foundation of we've built something together, we've worked on something together, how does that help make something like Exploit maybe a little bit more possible, a little bit easier, a little bit more exciting? Does it change the process having worked together before?
Yeah, I think so. I think the big difference, I think just having that experience of working together so closely for so long and like being in the trenches together, you know, it's like there's not really any ego between us. If I do like a take on a page and send it to Laura and it comes back, let's say completely different, the whole thing is like deleted and then redid, that could happen. And it's like, okay, great. this is great. This reads great. I don't really care. You know,
I also send that to you knowing like he might come back and be like, completely different. But like but his third take will also be different from his first take.
These things happen. Yeah. You know, but like I don't think there's a lot of ego between us, and I think it also lets us like throw out kind of crazy ideas a lot of times, and you're not scared about like being wrong. You know, and it's like you can just try things. And I think not having that ego and just kind of saying, I think we were talking about this a little bit the other day, but like having like the first response that I think we really try to do is like just not say no. And just like, don't shoot anything down. Just, let's just, okay, well, that's interesting. And in my head, it might be like, well, that's not at all what we were talking about before. But okay, let's just look. Let's just talk it out. How could that work? And maybe it doesn't work at all. And you know, that happens quite a bit, right? Both ways. But not having that ego, I think was a big thing, I think.
Yeah, and I think that can be a hard place to get to. I mean, like, this is like how I was actually just trying to share a picture that I don't know how to share, but it's me and Tim like 15 years ago being extremely young at a Comic Foundry table. And we have a sign up that says Eisner Award losers. And it's a great picture. And it's like, I mean, my 20s were pretty chaotic. Tim has seen me at like a wide range of events in my life. And we've made things together at all different stages in our lives. And I think there's just like a trust in that. And especially because he and I are both very high functioning individuals in a certain sense, especially like the things that you end up having to pull off on the fly in various journalism and like deadlines are God, you know, like I do think it's a great discipline to have had because like I will be on time and we will publish. And the instincts and I don't know how to, where it's just like, it's non-optional. When you develop that discipline, it's like one way or another, we're going to figure out a way to fix this. And I do think that having had that discipline, like if something goes wrong, I just know we're going to figure it out. It's just going to be the matter of degree of how we fix
this. Just for context, right? Like when we were making Comic Foundry magazine, there were definitely some times where we'd be on deadline and we'd be in like my junior 1-bedroom Upper East Side apartment until like 3 or 4 in the morning, just like frantically trying to like process, you know, final changes.
All the pages are like pasted on the wall. I have work in the morning. The sun's coming up.
It was like layer. It was less of an apartment, more of a layer. And all the layouts are kind of posted up on the wall. There's like tape and post-it notes and everything. And it's like borderline sunlight coming out, you know, and we're just trying to like frantically do all the changes. Like if we could do that and get it out, like we'll be fine.
Yeah.
Truly living in New York in my 20s and everything that I was flying by the seat of my pants 24 hours a day and pulling it off. That's what that whole period of my life was like definitely about. And it's like, I have learned 2 things. 1, I can do that. 2, I don't want to live that way all the time. It's a lot. It's a very high energy intensive way to live. And most of the time these days, I would like to chill and play video games and watch Netflix. But I think now it's more tactical. It's more about like when you turn it on. There is a little part of me that gets a thrill from like, everything's happening right now. We got to do the thing. Can you do the thing? It's like the newsroom, like excitement. I do respond to that. And like, I think with my ADHD responds super well to deadlines. I can do anything with a gun to my head. That's not a suggestion, but it's just like, but I'm where I'm just like a metaphorical gun to my head, where if you're like, this must occur, then I'm like, then it will. I do like the part of me that turns on and gets things done. I just don't want to be her all the time. And being that person all the time doesn't lead to my best creative work.
I do like that basically everything you've talked about in this conversation and just thinking about your careers, because, you know, as you've noted, you've also done other things in the journalism space. Like Laura, you worked at The Verge and Wired and Beyond, and Tim's been at Entertainment Weekly and Complex and others. Well, go ahead.
And Wired.
And Wired at the same time, right?
Well, not unrelated. I mean,
not unrelated. But I mean, so that's where I was going with this is like you have all these things. You have like that 20s energy that like, am I going to be late? Am I going to be late for this big meeting with Rowan?
You see where it's coming from.
Oh my God. It's interesting that like you can really see how your lives are channeled into a comic that is fundamentally about a young person trying to find their place in the world in this tech journalism world where everything is kind of shit and everything's falling apart and you're trying to make it work. I guess bringing it all together, why is Exploit the story you wanted to make your comics writing debut with, and how did it actually come together? Like, where did Kirby and her story come from beyond your entire lives, apparently?
Tim.
Oh, I was gonna say, go ahead, Laura.
Oh, see, this is where we both think the other person had the idea. That's amazing.
I mean, maybe you both had, like, it's like Dade. Like, you know that Dade came from Tim, but I'm sure that there's things you can point to through the entire run that, like,
there's a character that Tim came up with, and I'm so fucking mad. You know I'm not really mad, Tim, but I am. Because I wished that I had come up with this character, because it's, like, the best. And you haven't really met this person much.
Well, let's talk about the
origins.
The origin of it, though.
Okay, I just wanted to say I'm mad at you.
I appreciate
creating that character.
That's like the best compliment.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't even remember where this idea came from. I really...
You know it was 2019, though, right? That was kind of the birthday?
Yeah. This was... The last meeting we had was the last one before we shut down for the pandemic.
That's
like,
right.
that was
we
like
went to a cafe.
Yeah.
We went to a cafe and you had... I'm looking up to see if you sent me some sort of document, because that sounds like you.
Probably. There's probably 87 different versions of it. But I think it was... The real nut of the idea was just like a woman that works at a magazine that makes a big discovery. That was kind of just like, well, let's start there. Like, let's have our Lois Lane, and like, let's just talk about like what would that even be like, and could the story be? And I think that's just really where we started, and then just started kicking things around at a cafe.
It's so organic. I keep bringing that up because like I do feel like I've definitely been in spaces where I've had personal urges to be like, no, that was my idea. I had a good idea, guys. Like, I want everyone to know that I had the good idea. And like with Tim, I'm just like, I have no idea. One thing that has driven a lot of our work over the years that has come specifically from Tim, not from me, but like especially from Tim, is this deep love of print. Tim is in many ways a creature of print, you know, like Comic Foundry happened because he wanted to make a magazine, because there is something special about like, I feel like not having magazines now, like you can kind of feel it more. Like it was nice to go get a magazine and grab it and page through it. And one of the things I like about magazines is the diversity of the types of writing you can get in it. It's funny because I took some of that approach into Comics Alliance. And one of the things I noticed were people were just like occasionally thrown, where they'd be like, you just did something really serious, and like now there's this super funny piece. And I'm like, yes, there are a variety of different types of pieces and tones that we adopt at different points for different types of material. And I like that about magazines as a convention, and Tim has his own relationship to design. And when we were approaching this story, if we're going to tell a story about journalism, the dissolution of print is probably going to need to be part of it, because that's happening on a couple levels, right? It's changing the actual shape of what's being made. It's changing the shape of how it's being received, and on a financial level, you know, the rise of digital. I mean, it's just tough. I mean, you've got the news desert situation. You've got the hedge funds that are just like, you know, strip mining newspapers across the nation. I mean, doing good journalism is extremely disincentivized at this point in time. And I feel like there's an element of it that's just like, this is happening because capitalism just strips things whenever it can and extracts whatever value it can. But there is a part of it that feels a lot more malevolent to me now.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. America, the future is calling you. The weekly 2000 AD will hit shelves across the USA this May. This is the comic that discovered Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Garth Ennis, Al Ewing, Danny, and more, and it's coming to a shelf near you. 2080 has never been available to read weekly in America before, so if you've always wanted to try out the galaxy's greatest comic, now's your chance. Every 32-page issue of 2080 brings you the best in sci-fi and horror, and this May will feature new stories like Judge Dredd, Brink, Nightmare in New York, The Fall of Dead World, and more. All you need to do is order from your local comic store, and issues of 2080 will be available for you to pick up every single week. It's never been easier to read 2080, so what are you waiting for, Earthlets? Add 2080 to your pull list today. And now, back to the show. One of my questions was going to be basically like, how much did your frustrations with this space, the journalism space and tech space, factor into the book? And the answer is a lot.
The answer is
I'm
a
guessing.
lot.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing, though, is like you have this idea, you have the journalism space you're building from, you have the tech space you're building from. I imagine the tricky part was, A, what you talked about earlier, keeping it relevant over the 7 years it took for it to come out. And then B, turning it into a real narrative, like something that people would actually care about, because you can just have the pure frustrations built into it. But if you don't have Kirby and you don't have Lennox, who I want to say is my favorite character so far,
I'm like,
you don't have a story. So, yes, it seems like that was a key part of the development, is like figuring out how you connect A to B.
For sure. And so much of that is like character driven, I think, for us. I think, you mentioned Lennox. She's the best. Love Lennox. And Laura, do you want to kind of set up who Lennox is for people that haven't seen the book yet?
Yeah, so Lennox is Kirby's roommate. Like, not all of the circumstances are like necessarily spelled out in the first issue, but they live together after Kirby finally makes it to the city, and she ends up connecting with Lennox, who is, I think, euphemistically a freelance IT consultant. Let's say she's a hacker. It's just Kirby doesn't ask. She doesn't know. She doesn't ask. But Lennox does. One of the reasons they connected was, Kirby looking for sources for, she's been hustling for a while trying to like get this internship, like do her own little form of journalism, which I just had a flashback, Tim, to Comic Foundry and running around Times Square and talking to the comic book sellers. Do you remember when you sent me off to do that? You have no memory of this whatsoever.
No.
You sent me on assignment to go interview all of the people selling comic books in Times Square.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, and I went and talked. It was actually super
not
cool.
like Midtown Comics. Like,
No.
Like people like
street.
vendors on the street. Yeah.
Like bros on the street. And so I went there and interviewed them all. I'm sorry, I just had like a super strong flashback to that.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
But yeah, and I think too, we saw the opportunity to have like sort of a duality, right? Like we have Kirby, who's the main character, and then we're going to have someone that she's going to be kind of not having friction with, but having like someone to bounce off of, someone that's going to be not her in an interesting way. And one of the ways we thought about Kirby is that she's sort of more traditional journalism, more analog, more like, feet on the ground, running around. And so we associate her more with like print and that very tangible analog approach to things, whereas Lennox is completely digital. She's not just a hacker, she's also someone who is agoraphobic. Various unspecified reasons that, came out of the pandemic. And I think that reflects something that happened to a lot of people during the pandemic, which is you go inside, and especially when things start going a little crazy outside, it's a lot less appealing to start going outside. And that can be kind of self-perpetuating. So she becomes this figure. She never leaves the apartment, and yet she plays an active role throughout a lot of this because, it's the future, so you don't have to be somewhere to be there.
She's the guy in the chair.
Yeah. And so I like that she and Kirby continue to have conversations at various points throughout and I like the internet as that layer. Like where people are doesn't matter. They're still having these conversations wherever. And I like the two of them as these, they're not in conflict necessarily, but they have different approaches to things. And, I do think I understand that time moves on and, but I don't think that this is just sitting around weeping because the horse and buggy seller is like going under or whatever. I think there are real, tangible, important things that are being lost in the move away from print. And not all of them are print specific, but the way that everything is dissolved, we're losing a lot of them at the same time, and it worries me. The lack of local journalism worries me because I feel like that's foundational to journalism. I'm like, so many things worry me. This wasn't about taking a position where it's like print is good and digital is bad and blah, blah, blah. I think both Kirby and Lennox have their own approaches to things. And throughout the story, we see how valuable both of them are. And there is also an element to which Lennox she is isolated and has isolated herself in a physical way. She has such a rich life online, but then in a physical sense, Kirby's her only friend. So I kind of like those contrasts that can happen and do happen in real life. You know, that's the sort of that cliche of the person who's like super active online and then afraid to leave the house.
I really like Kirby as the lead, and I like Riot Magazine because it's like you're not really necessarily making a statement, but you are kind of underlining and reinforcing the value of print journalism through this book, which I really appreciate, especially as a person who still makes print books myself, which Tim did a cover of last year. Thank you, Tim. You're the best. So, Lennox, you have this person who is a great complement to Kirby Quo, the 34-year-old Riot Magazine intern at the heart of the story. Why was Kirby the right way into this story for the two of you? Like, what made her the right lead for this story?
I also just say very briefly that she's someone who comes in as an outsider, like the audience, but still someone who's very much on the inside. So she gives us kind of the entree to this world that she's beginning to navigate at the same time. That's one reason.
I think it's also, she's just the character, at least for me, the character that I really connect to and resonate with. And, you know, we were talking about that feeling of being just 5 years too late, you know, or 10 years too late even. I felt that for, you know, pretty much my whole career, you know.
And we're millennials. We're not even Gen Z. They're super fucked.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Even for us, I feel like when we started, they're like, "Oh man, it used to be so good just a couple years ago. You just missed it."
Yeah, oh my God. And then like the older journalists, they're just like, "You don't even know," and you're like, "Oh, maybe it'll be amazing for me someday too." Like, no.
3 years ago, we took the whole staff to Tahiti, and we're like, "Wait, what?" Like, I'm just trying to get paper clips.
Two things I want to say. So one is that we had seen Riot. We've worked for tech magazines and enjoyed them. But the approach that we wanted to take to this was like, we didn't want to do tech magazines tend to be dominated by men. I know you're shocked, but it is a true reality. And we didn't want to take that approach. And so we were like, okay, so realistically, how do we have this type of magazine? And again, this is not our world, any plausible world. How could things have gone? Like if you go back to the 90s, which I was there for, that super hyper idealistic time, there was a lot of like futurism going on. There was also a lot of really interesting sort of punk feminist thought going on. Like there is the Riot Girl. This comic was originally called Riot, but we changed it for, you know, reasons of time.
I like the design of the cover because it cuts out the riot from behind it. Very nice.
See, I think I can say this because I'm like, we don't need to get into every single thing that happened, but there was a riot. There was a real riot in our capital. And then we were like, hey, maybe we don't attach our book to riots for like whatever reason, because there could be more riots in the future. We'll just
riots are having terrible PR right now. Terrible PR.
We're not going to co-brand with riots. So we're going to switch to exploit, which had a couple different meanings that we thought was cool. And we kept it as the name of the comic.
It also made me think that Tim sent me a computer virus when he sent me the file. So that was very exciting.
It's all been a long con. He's been a hacker this whole time. It's all been building up to this. But I always saw Riot as sort of a cross between like, if you going back to the 90s, like the emerging Wired and sort of the emerging like sassy bitch kind of culture. And it's like, what if those two had been melded at that time? And this magazine, as some magazines has endured to this point, but like now everything's starting to fall apart as it is. And what would that look like? Because that's more interesting to me because it's a story that I haven't heard. Mainly because it doesn't exist, but it could have. I mean, you think about this with the internet, like having been in that era and heard all of the idealistic things about how everything was going to connect us and how beautiful the future would be. But it's like, but it didn't have to go the way it did. It could have gone other ways. And I do think that's something important to think about as we behold our dark future, where it's like, it didn't have to go that way and it doesn't have to go certain ways. Those are choices that we end up making, maybe not individually, but as a culture. And Yeah, super worried about that. Anyway.
One more point about the 90s is that our other co-creator, Emiliana Pina, she really looked to the 90s for a lot of fashion inspiration as well, and some of the character design. And so like that kind of through line just carries on visually as well throughout the book.
Because I do think there was like I mean, there's definitely like a nihilistic fuck it all kind of sentiment that many people feel today, and that's very understandable. But like, I don't know, there's something about like something of the punk spirit of that time. It was just like, fuck it, fuck corporations, fuck this. There was a very pure fuck it energy that like I really appreciated, and like, I don't know, it just felt like something I personally felt like I needed. Not, it may not resonate with everybody else the same way, but I'm just like the pure middle finger mentality of that all. Like, I made a playlist of like all of the different songs that I was, there's, you know, there's Bikini Kill and La Tigra and like lots of other weird stuff too. But I was just like, you listen to those songs enough and you're like, yeah, fuck all this shit. And like, I wanted that kind of, it's not like I sit around feeling that way 24 hours a day, you know, but like it is a way I feel, and it's a way I want other people to be able to feel, especially in a time when it's like super easy to feel hopeless and ground down and like there's absolutely nothing you can do. Well, there is. And it's flipping people off. And there can be a number of actions that follow after that. But I feel like start with flipping them off and then go from there. Good first step.
I like the fact that it's like, I don't know, not to make a cliche statement about locations, but it almost feels like Riot is a character in this book, especially with like Rowan and like everyone falling apart in the, well, spoilers for the first issue. And like, it is really interesting.
A magazine falls apart?
I know. Well, I mean, and it's fun too, because it kind of sets up this like, it's not a heist, but there's like a desperation to where it's like, we're going to pull the one last job before everything falls apart. Like that whole part of the narrative, it really, really works for me. I don't know. It's funny. I love that type of story. I love like journalism stories like Spotlight and All the President's Men and stuff like that. And also I love hackers references. So I'm like a perfect person for this. I do want to bring up your collaborators because you mentioned Emiliana Pina. Rebecca Good is always exceptional with her colors. I do want to say that Frank Cvetkovic did one really, really cool thing during one of the Riot scenes with his letters where there was like overlapping letters happening on them. There's just really, really nice work by him. But you also had something that I think is very useful for creators who are operating on their first project and really kind of putting together for the first time, which is you had a veteran editor in John Moyson on the book. How has been the process of figuring out collaboration with others to create this reality? Was there a learning curve to that to some degree, or is that something that you took to naturally?
I think having that editorial help was incredibly helpful because this is our first go in that, right? Like,
yeah.
We've like written things, but we haven't brought people on before. And I didn't really know the process or how that worked at all. And so Mad Cave has been really great partners in that, and
really supportive. Really
supportive.
They were on board with the book from like the jump, which is a great feeling, you know, when you've been wandering in the wilderness and someone's like, I love that. It's a great feeling. I mean, I will say I like working with Emiliana, and
her cover is great. I honestly think that that's a really striking image to kick up the whole thing.
And that was like...
She killed it.
Because we got a whole bunch of potential ones, and it was like, pick out your favorites. And like every single person, including Emiliana, was like, this one. Such an easy choice. I love it when that happens. But like, you know, we very much, you know, we're very creator rights focused. Like we care about that a lot. Like to us, like Emiliana she's not a pinch hitter. You know, she is a co-creator of all of this.
She's not executing your vision. She's part of the vision. She's a teammate.
So often, you know, we would write in there like, so this is kind of how we see it, but like, please have your own vision as well. If you see it differently, great. That's a benefit. That is a feature, not a bug, you know? And Emiliana's great. I just, you know, the thing that like really drew me, pun intended, to Emiliana is like, I just love the quality of her line weight. She has like a really expressive line, and I just love, you know, her black and whites are just fantastic. They're beautiful, and she's super expressive. Her characters are great. Yeah, love Emiliana's work on this.
Issue 3 is online. The cover for issue 3 is online now. If you want to, I'm like, let me go see before I start spouting off shit. But I'm like pretty sure I saw it, and it's super cool looking. Yes.
I'm looking at it.
Okay. The
Oh,
Mario.
that's so fun.
Isn't that neat?
It's for listeners that won't be able to see it because it's a audio medium. It is a Mario style. Oh my God, was side scroll? God, what am I going for here?
Level 1-1.
Platformer.
It's level 1-1, you guys.
Yeah.
That's
It's
all you
level
need to know.
1-1. It's platform. It's great. That is super fun. I'm not really familiar with her work, but I was very impressed by what she brought to this. The whole team is really, really good. I mean, that is the nice thing, again, is like having somebody like John on your team. It's like finding the right person can be difficult, especially if you're not living and breathing in the comic book minds, and finding like the right letter, finding the right colors and everything like that. And so having a teammate like that, I imagine, helped quite a bit.
Yeah, and like especially because like, you know, fashion's not like completely irrelevant to this, you know?
Yeah.
Like this is a book where, you know, style is part of it.
These are cool people. They got to look cool.
They do have to look cool. Like if you're saying someone's cool and they don't look cool, like there's cognitive dissonance. This is like one of my biggest pet peeves with like media, where they'll be like, this person is like the greatest singer, writer, dancer, artist that's ever been. Don't show them doing it. Don't show them doing it, because if they
There's no
do
way you
it,
can live up to it.
right? And if it is not genuinely that amazing, you're gonna ruin the story. So just don't show us. But we wanted to show it. We wanted, and I did kind of like that idea of like, what if we did kind of like take 90s fashion? If we're like trying to evoke this like feeling, but modernize it. Also, this is very reflective of actual Gen Z trends. You know, the 90s is, you know, a somewhat fetishized era for reasons. They're good. It's just a really cool time. Integrating that into it was very helpful. And it's also like, I am not as visual a person as Emiliana is, or as Tim is. Like I very high on my verbal scores. Let's say that and stop. You know, I'll have these worlds in my mind in kind of a nebulous way. And then I'll just be like, do things. And this is true of both Emiliana and Tim. And then they'll just come back with something like completely fucking gorgeous. And that's a magical thing to be able to do. So if you can do that, I recommend you do it a lot. Just make people make amazing things for you.
I fully support that. Do you feel like you learned anything about comics from working on this side of it? Like, do you look at the medium differently after making Exploit together?
I'll just say something briefly and then hand it to Tim, which is that like, I have heard people say this, and it's true. Making anything is so hard.
Yeah.
Anything in depth like this, it is so hard to do, to execute. So I do have a certain amount of respect for that. I mean, again, not every process of making comics is 7 years long. So I think it's been a little extra. But, you know, it is always hard to make something.
I was just impressed with like the level of detail that goes in at every stage, and like, right, like making magazines is very collaborative, right? And like making a website is very collaborative, right? But I feel like this is a true team sport, you know? And I think that's kind of like what was so kind of humbling to see, just like everything that goes into it, and like how much everyone is bringing to every single step. And I think it's sometimes and like I knew that on a fundamental level, right? But then just to witness it just feels like something different. Especially, I think that's lost a lot of time when you're maybe looking at a comic that took like several years to make, but it's like takes 10 minutes to read, you know? And you're just like, oh yeah, cool, flip, you know? And sometimes that effort is invisible. But I think that was a real takeaway for me, of just like everything that goes into it, to kind of what Laura is echoing here. But
yeah, the production to consumption ratio is very imbalanced. You can spend a gajillion years and someone will just be like, and 1 second.
I mean, I think one of the things that's really interesting about comics, and I actually I wrote about Absolute Wonder Woman in regards to this when I was writing about it last year, is that like every comic is the product of a practically infinite number of decisions. Like you're talking about writing a script, and then you're coming out with layouts, and you give 100 artists the script you give them, and you're going to end up with 100 different layouts probably. And then you're going to have like, you know, character acting, all these different things, lettering, coloring, all this stuff. And it's honestly like I've never made a comic. I'm the comics journalist who has no interest in actually making comics. But at the same time, I look at comics, like even comics that I don't love, I look at them as miracles. It's amazing that these things happen in the long scheme or in the grand scheme of things. And the fact that like you five, the creators that worked on the book, could find each other and like turn in something that ends up being very good it's a miracle. So good job by you two and the rest.
I'm like, thank you. Yes, it is.
Comics are amazing.
It is. And like, because I can't do many of these things. I do think it's a miracle in the sense of like, I could never ask for these. If I sent out a request and I was like, the amount of time that people have spent and the ideas that they've brought to this, it doesn't seem reasonable for me to ask for that from these people. You know what it means? Especially because there are things that I couldn't do. I couldn't offer these things in return. It is a miracle to me as someone who can't do many of those things. Yeah, it's magical.
Here.
And now, a quick word from one of our sponsors. This May, Oni Press is proud to present Destination Kill #1, the first 40-page chapter of a visually arresting and stylishly addictive comics thrill ride written, illustrated, and lettered by British comics virtuoso Joe Palmer. In the footsteps of Judge Dredd, V for Vendetta, and Tank Girl, the UK's next great milestone in dystopian science fiction starts here, as rendered by one of the most incendiary visual storytellers in comics today. The year is 2125. Welcome to London. An all-powerful mega corporation is remaking England's central city with a new class of robot drones, and the few human workers still on the job are in the throes of an all-out rebellion. Now, the only thing standing between them and full-blown chaos is a stressed-out, pill-popping police detective and a runaway train on a collision course with a metropolis that's ready to explode. The future is a riot in Joe Palmer's Destination Kill #1, on sale in May, only from Oni Press. And now, back to the show. To close, I had a few questions that didn't have anything to do with exploit. Actually, kind of, one of them does. I had a patron question related to the topic of print. One of my patrons, Stephen Tramontana, he actually wanted to talk about, in regards to Comic Foundry in specific, he pointed out that while print has kind of disappeared for the most part in terms of comics journalism, there's been a bit of a resurgence. Like Zdarsky Comic News came out. It's gone, but it's being replaced by Comics the Magazine. Tiffany Babb is keeping it alive with the comic staple coming and Comics Courier being a thing. Not to throw myself in there, but I also do my books every year. And so people are doing their thing. I do want to note, like, I actually think that there's some really amazing stuff happening in the general, like, entertainment and, like, arts world. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen A Profound Waste of Time or AppWat, which is a video games magazine. Mm-hmm. Like, literally, like, one of the greatest magazines I've ever seen in my entire life. I absolutely love it. And, you know, Steven asked, basically, he's like, he thinks that there's a newfound interest in physical media in this space, which I'm going to add, reflects well upon Gen Z and Gen Alpha, some, like, turning towards physical media in a way that, like, the current generations have kind of went away from. It seems like we're starting to see a revival in print comics journalism. Steven wonders, do you see it that way, or is it too early to tell?
I definitely see it that way. Yeah, I mean, all those examples. I mean, you know, Comics the Magazine. What did they say? They got like 100,000.
100,000.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. That's amazing. That's incredible.
Amazing
right?
job, guys. Amazing job.
It's huge. I'm really looking forward to Tiffany's work. You know, the Comics Courier Kickstarters were great, and I love that what she's doing, like a zine focused one. I think it's great. I think everything's trending right in the wave of like perhaps being too online or everything being so digital. Like there's a great, you know, resurgence of physical media, whether it's, you know, record players or, you know, iPod minis or something, or print magazines.
Blu-rays.
Things are starting to like tip back that way trend wise. And I'm here for it. I love it. I can't wait to get them. Can't wait to read them. Can't wait to buy them.
I mean, zines, I've always liked zines, and zines have always felt kind of part of, adjacent to, you know, the indie comic scene. And, you know, like there have been these kind of mini resurgences where like Gen Z like discovers zines. You can, like, here's the thing, is what I like about each medium is what it does that the others can't. You can't do with digital what you can do with a zine. You cannot hand you cannot hand a digital file to your friend in the same way. Another fun thing about print that I've thought about a lot, it doesn't necessarily make it into the book as much, but just a way to think about it is nothing is as unhackable as print. Nothing. You know, if you want to talk about information security, one way to achieve it is going back to older formats, whether that's older, you know, physical devices, you know, some people have found some utility in that, or literally fucking paper. There's a friend of mine who had to send some things to someone for reasons and did not want this person to be able to track them down after. So this friend called me and was like, how do I do the thing with the files so I can't get caught? And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what are you sending? And he was like, it's a physical file. I was like, put on gloves, print it out, and send it. The physical files. And he's like, you're a genius. And I was like, I'm not. I just understand what paper is. The old ways are best sometimes, guys. That's all I'm saying. There's utility there. And it's a beautiful medium.
It is funny that, comics are obviously a specific medium that has been very resistant and hesitant from moving away from print. I mean, it's just like there's the direct market had an incredible year last year. There's a massive influx of new readers. There's like the book market's still doing well, like manga is a sensation, et cetera, et cetera. And it makes sense that readers would respond to that. I don't know. I find it very encouraging because I love print stuff. Like I'm with both of you. I'm ride or die with it. I would be the 34-year-old intern at Riot Magazine if I was, in a different life. And so I love seeing it. I hope it keeps happening. And it was funny though, because like, Tim, I remember we had dinner in Los Angeles, and I think that was like Tiffany was just talking to us about comics career then. Yeah. And it's funny that like I like that Tiffany has become like this. I don't know. She's like, come hell or high water, I'm going to make print things happen. And it's very cool. Like you need people to advocate for that in the space, and she's doing a really good job of it. So good job, Tiffany.
Well, and also, this cuts both ways, obviously, but like nobody is in this for the money. Nobody.
I am personally.
You are personally.
I'm trying to get as rich as humanly possible. So far, so not so good. But TBD.
I feel like we might have made some tactical errors.
Yeah, you've made some bad choices, my friend. You've erred. Obviously, it would be great if we all could make sustainable incomes in the United States of America. But I do also appreciate that, like, when I tend to deal with people from comics, they're people who love this medium pretty consistently, and that's just the thing I like.
Yeah. The last question I have for you, I want to talk about, one of the things I find interesting is you were so embedded in the comics world for so long. Let's start with a really quick question. Do you two keep up with the world of comics? I know Tim does to some degree because he listens to my podcast, but do you, Laura, do you still keep up with comics?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. Both in the sense of like, I'm still, going and reading the books, and like everyone I know is in comics. Not everybody. I know other people. I have non-comics friends, but it's just like for me, I ended up, for a couple of reasons, taking a step back from social media. Oh, yeah. Like I have a very all or nothing personality. I have trouble with moderation, and like that chip slots into my brain so fast, and I'm good at it. It's the bad part. Like, if I were bad at it and it wasn't rewarding, it would be easier to stay away from it. But I'll start and I'll do things and people will respond. And where are we going to go from there, David?
Not writing scripts with Tim, that's for sure.
But it's just like, but there's a part of me that's like, like my brain is still so trained where like things will happen and full tweets will appear in my mind. Where I'm just like, this will get 1 million likes. And I just have to be like, no. I might try again though. I might try again. I'm like, I'm older now and things have changed. And maybe I can just be on Blue Sky. Maybe I can just, have one tweet.
So you do keep up with comics. I'm curious, like now that you're on the outside to some degree, like you have friends in the space, you pay attention to stuff, but you're not in it every single day. How do you view the world of comics from the outside, especially compared to where things were when you were writing about that space on the regular?
I don't know. Like I've never, ever, well, that's not true. I was like, when I was, in my tweens and teens, I interacted with comics normally, as one would, as a fan. But in my adult life, I've never interacted with comics in, a quote unquote, like civilian way. I've never been to a comic convention that I wasn't covering. So for me, stepping back a little bit allowed me to experience the world like a little bit more as a fan. Yeah. Where it's like, it is a little weird when you like kind of like, if I don't know. When you get to know everybody, sometimes it's like you read a comic and you're like, you're not seeing it entirely clean. You're like, oh, it's that guy Bob. It's not, I'm not talking about anyone named Bob, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
or it's just like, so
it personalizes it. You can't take the person out of the comic itself.
Yeah, it's all connected for better or worse with like these like years of interactions and weird emails, or like who fucking knows. But like, it's kind of nice to just have it be clean and go to a store and buy a comic and read the comic and be like, I'm just a fan of this comic. I don't have to tell anybody anything about this comic. I can have an opinion and tell no one. And then that frustrates me. But like, I do think it's been good for me to have more of that fan experience of just like, I'm just a schmo and I walk to the shop and I get the book and I go home. And it's not any more complex than that.
When we were doing Comic Foundry, it's like you read a book and you're like, your brain is just on.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if this happens for you, David, right? When you're reading something, you're like, oh, you're reading this page, like, oh, this could be, I've got like 4 story ideas. And it's like, I'm on page 6. It's like the wheels are constantly turning and trying to figure out like, oh, what we can interview this guy, we can interview, talk to her, we can write this thing about this, but so we can list about X, Y, and Z.
Your brain is a content generation machine, and everything that you encounter you're trained to create content. And I was kind of this way about my life at a certain point, where like almost every single thing I did became content. Whatever it was. It was playing. Did I play video games? That's content now. Did I watch TV? That's content now. Did I do anything? That's content now. And I would recommend that no one live this way. It's not good. It won't lead you down a good path. Not every part of your life should be consumable. So for me, because like all of my hobbies became my job, all of them. And I think being able to step back and be like, I just play a game. I don't need to play 20 hours of the game before it comes out and write a 2,000 word piece on it. Because that's a different way of playing a game, my friends. It's a very different way of playing a game. And having like all of those media experiences, like we're attuned to generating things for other people.
It changes how you look at it.
And it's a great job in some ways, but it was always there's a way in which you're watching yourself from the outside. Imagine how other people, you're talking to an audience is kind of a weird way of being that can become very natural. But like for me, it was like, I was no longer focused on what I thought about things in like a pure way. It was some mix of how I feel and what I think other people want and need. And just so taking that out of the equation, where it's just like, I think it's a good return to fundamentals of like, what do I just like? I don't have to read and consume things I don't like anymore. And I used to do that constantly because I needed to know what was going on. I needed to like have sampled the full plate. And like, I'm like, I can't even tell you how beneficial it is to just like not consume things that you hate because you have to. Yeah, that's my answer. I don't think I even realized that till I just told you that, but that's all great.
Tim, are you the same way to some degree?
Yeah. Kind of not having that pressure of trying to keep tabs on everything. Not that I was even remotely being capable of doing that.
It's a full-time job, my friend.
Yeah.
Consuming everything.
And I don't know, just being able to step away and just focus on the things you like and enjoy. I mean, what a gift.
You're also more likely, by the way, to like come up with your own original ideas that you like. It's normal. For example, I like to think about things that are like normal human events that I like to take part in as a human. And one thing that normal humans do is they are drawn to media that they enjoy. They consume it. And then they potentially have new ideas based on the thing that they like. This has been a civilization-long artistic drive. And like, that's what we're supposed to do as artists, as creators, is seek out those things, let them enrich us, and then make more stuff. We do not have to put a funnel in our mouths and just constantly shove junk into ourselves to feel, I don't know, completist?
Yeah.
You know, again, when you are an editor, and this is like at Wired, it was the worst. I love Wired. I love my job there. But my purview was entertainment. That is all movies, all TV shows, all music. God help me, because I'm not a music journalist. All video games. And it's just like, it's an unreasonable amount of and you know, you have your own writers, and some of them, I had someone who specialized in music and specialized in movies. But it's still my job to like, you think I'd be getting requests to be like, come on our radio station and like talk about this like random fucking thing that like you don't know anything about. And then you're like, fuck, I guess I'm supposed to know all about that and everything else. And it's like, you become a generalist. being a comics specialist, it's so specialized. And then, on the other side, you can become this type of generalist who's supposed to know everything. And I don't like that either. It is a very different thing to just be like, I like the things I like. It's not my job to like certain things anymore.
Well, I'm glad that you've been able to take a step back and enjoy comics in that way. And I'm also glad that you guys are getting into comics in, the creative way, because Exploit is great. Everyone should go and read it. But Laura, Tim, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk about Exploit, collaboration, your careers, and everything else. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks
for having us. This was awesome.